Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of my Bigfoot sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of run-down no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sightings were strictly in Pennsylvania. I've never had any other sightings in any other states. My second sighting was in Quebec Run Wildlife Area, which is located near Farmington, PA. And my family and I and a couple of my daughter's friends were walking down Quebec Hollow. And when we got down so far, I noticed something flanking us to the right up on the hill from us. So I kept an eye on it, and we continued to walk, and we went down by Rankin Trail, which there's a creek flowing there. Very nice area, and had a small picnic. Stayed down there for about an hour or two, and then on the way back up, I noticed the same thing on my left side walking back up the trail. It's actually like a tram road, but I noticed something flanking us again to the left of us up on the hill. So I stopped, and I grabbed a big stick, and everybody was wondering what I was doing. And I smacked the tree 3 times and stood there and got no response. I smacked the tree again twice, doing wood knocks. And about 5 seconds later, I got a response back from up on top of the hill. And everybody's mouths dropped open and their eyes got big. And they said, "You have somebody up on that hill." I said, "No, I do not." I said, "I don't want to tell you guys when we walked in here, but I noticed something flanking us going down in." And I said, then when we came back up, I noticed something was flanking us again. I really couldn't tell what it was. So, but I mean, if you do a wood knock and you get a response back, I don't think a bear can pick up a stick as well and hit a tree. But that was like my most recent experience. That's probably been several years back. Then my very first close-up real experience was September 8th, 2011, at a newly being built windmill farm, which is located in Farmington, PA. And I started security up there for a couple different companies, guarding their assets. Like I said, they were in the process of making windmills and getting copper wire in. And previous to that, though, I had a warrant for a gentleman right across the state line, and I was up in that area on several occasions. And one morning when I was up there on my way back, since I couldn't get this gentleman that had a warrant, I had somebody run out in the middle of the road in front of me about 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was a construction worker, and he thought, I was like a regular police officer, and he said, "We need your help, we need your help." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" And he said, "Take me back this road." He said, "Can I ride with you?" I said, "Come on." So he explained to me on the way back, he said they found a guy with his pickup truck and torches and he was cutting copper wire off this huge spool, and he was almost done with it until the workers showed up. And when I got there, I pulled up. This guy was immense. I mean, he was a big man, and there was 6 construction workers on top of him, holding him down. And I told the guys, I said, get off of him. I said, we'll cuff him. So I had to use 2 sets of cuffs on this guy. And then we sat him up against his pickup truck. And I detained him there while the state police came. And that's how I got the job. Supervisor was there, and he's like, we could really use somebody like you. He said, would you be interested? And I said, sure. I'd be very interested. He said, can you start tonight? I said, sure, I can start. So I started that night, and the first night was June 3rd, June 4th of 2011. And I started that night at 7 o'clock in the evening, and it was very quiet, very peaceful, very docile environment. I actually enjoyed it. But the first night, like I said, I was enjoying it. I heard a wood knock down in Quebec Hollow, which was directly in front of me across Skyline Drive. And I was like, what in the heck was that? I had no idea of where that sound came from, what it was. I had no clue whatsoever. So that evening, 3:30, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, rolled around, and I kept on hearing wood knocks. I'd hear 1, then I'd hear 3, then I'd hear 2, and then I started hearing them, 1 in one area, which was Quebec Hollow, and then in another area, there was 1 to the right of me, probably about a good half a mile away. And it being so quiet up there, I heard like communication. And like I said, I have no idea what that was. No idea. So the day came and morning came, and I left at 7, went home, went to bed, got back up, went back up, arrived at 7 p.m. And right around 10 o'clock, 10:30 that evening, the second night I was there, I heard this god-awful, high-pitched scream. And that was the second night that I was there. And this scream was like it went up real high and then come down real fast. And it was very, very, very high pitch. And I thought, I wonder if that's a screech owl or coyote. Which it didn't sound like a coyote, and it didn't sound like a screech owl to me, but that's what I pawned it off to be. So anyway, a couple hours go by, and I hear it again. This time it was closer to me, and there was a little halogen street light, which lit up the parking lot fairly well, because I was sitting in a parking lot. If you're sitting in a parking lot where we had to sit, directly in front of you was a telephone pole, and then there was an 8-foot piece of plywood to the left of the pole. And like I've stated, the halogen light on the pole. And then to the right of that pole, about 23 feet, 22, 23 feet, was the first office trailer. And the plywood had the electrical boxes on for the office trailers. So I was sitting there, and I heard this loud, high-pitched scream again. A couple hours later, like midnight, 12:30, and it was a lot closer to me. And I got out my flashlight, and I shined it around, and I looked to my left, and I had a LED mag light, and it caught a glimpse of 2 red eyes. And they blinked at me, and then it was gone. I had no idea what that was. I had no idea when you shine a light, in an animal's eyes. I don't know of any animal that its eyes turn red. Usually they're green, but this was like a blood red. So that was my like second experience, in 2 nights, and I had no idea what it was. So as the days went on, I had to stay up there 2 weeks by myself. So as the days went on, the third night I went up, absolutely nothing happened. Nothing transpired. No sounds, no nothing. I went back up on the fourth night, and I remember this. I was sitting up there in my car, and I'm looking down at my phone, and it was probably 11:30, 12 o'clock, somewhere right around there. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at my phone, and I just happened to look up, and like I said, that telephone pole's in front of me with a halogen light. I'm looking at my phone, and I look up, and I happen to see something flying through the air, coming like right at me. Well, it was a rock, and it hit the top of my car and bounced off, and I jumped out of my car, and I just started, yelling. I was mad because it was a fairly big rock. So I shined my flashlight around, and nothing else transpired that night. So days went on, and just strange occurrences. On the sixth night, back behind me, there was woods, and I heard whoops, whoop, whoop, like that. And I'm like, what is going on here? I had no idea. I mean, I was like, what is making these noises? So, just little strange occurrences, howls. I heard like a low gruntle growl one evening to my left where I saw the red eyes, but I didn't see anything. So after 2 weeks of being there by myself, I was ready, to hire some other guys to come up and help me do this. And so they, hired 5 more guys, and one guy's name, he was Don Ross. He's a pretty big guy, like 260, 280, 6'4". So I brought him on board. And what we would do in the evening is he would sit in the parking lot where these things were messing with me, almost every night except for a couple nights. And I would go do my rounds. I would go check the windmills that were already erected. And then I would go to Kirby Road where the substation was, because there was copper. It was hidden over there, but there was copper laying out, and somebody could just walk in there and just, grab as much as they want and take off with it. So we had to go over there and patrol as well. So Don was there probably for about a week, and I was doing my rounds one night. Before that, I came back one night, and I said, I'm just going to ask him if anything has transpired while he's been sitting here. I asked him, I said, Don, I said, anything happened to you? While you're sitting there? He's like, nope, it's been all quiet. I'm like, I can't tell this guy. Yeah, I can't tell this guy, because he'll probably think that I'm nuts. So I didn't say anything. But about a week later, I'm over on Kirby Road at the substation, and we had 2-way radios. I hear Don screaming on the radio, hey, Doug, Doug. I'm like, what, Don? I said, are you okay? He's like, get over here. So I flew over there. I was about 6 miles away from him, and I flew over there. And I come flying up in the parking lot, and I pulled in, and he's sitting there, and he's like, did you just come from that way? I said, well, yeah, Don, you saw me. He's like, Oh, man, he put his head down, and I'm like, what's wrong? I said, you're white as a ghost. He's like, I said, I don't know what just happened. He said, he said, it really creeped me out. I said, what happened? He said, come on. Now, this is like 2 o'clock in the morning. So we walk over to, there was porta-johns in between office trailer 1 and 2. And then there was porta-johns at the end between office trailer 5 and 6. And there was like hardly any light there. So he said he was sitting in a porta-john. We walked over there. He said, I was sitting in his porta-john on the end towards the road. And he said, something pulled my porta-john halfway over and flung it back, and it banged off to the porta-john next to me. And he says, I have no idea what that was. He said, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear any footsteps. He said, I heard nothing. And where the porta-johns were sitting, there's like what they call number 3 gravel. And it's fairly big. It's probably like 4 inches long, probably about 2 inches wide. And when you walk on it with shoes, they clang together. And he said he heard nothing. He heard absolutely nothing. So I was like, huh. He said, see if you can reach that porta-john up there, up top. And I said, okay. So I reached up and I said, yeah, I can grab the side of it on the top here from the side. And he's like, you're too short. And I said, yeah, Don, I'm too short. And I said, are you thinking that I came back here and I messed with you? He said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. I said, no. I said, Don, I can't even pull that thing over, even with it empty. I said, there's no lip on it. I said, I can't pull it over. I'm too short. So he said, here. He said, he put his hands down like a step, and he said, get up there. He said, I'll hoist you up. So he hoisted me up, and there was like a dew that night. It was summertime, but there was like a dew on everything. And I looked on top of that porta-john, and there was a hand, probably 2.5, 3 times my size. And it just looked like just one handprint. And I was like, Dawn, I said, there's a handprint up here. I said, whatever it was had a big hand. And I said, it just like pushed down on the porta-john probably and pulled you over. And he's like, I don't know. And I took a picture with my old phone, which I don't have my old phone anymore. I lost it. But, so then after that, went back to our cars. Nothing else happened that night. And then for quite a while, really nothing happened too much. Don's brother, John, we were up there, doing security in the evening until morning. And he said, my brother's saying there's some strange stuff going on up here. I said, yeah, there is. And I told him about what happened to me. And he's like, huh. He said, you heard something screaming? And I said, yeah. So he let out this loud scream. I mean, just, wah! Well, lo and behold, about 5 seconds later, it screamed back at him. My eyes, his eyes got huge. Both our mouths dropped open, and I'm like, what was that? He says, I have no idea, but it was real close to us. I mean, very close to us. And I felt like cussing him out for doing that, but I didn't say a word to him, and I was like in awe, like in shock, like what did this? What made this noise? So, while he was up there, that's the only experience that he had and I had together. So as time went by, I kept on hearing more whoops, and every time Dawn would leave and I would be sitting in the parking lot, whatever it was messing with me. And it would mess with me, but it would not mess with anybody else. I couldn't gather why this thing would only mess with me and nobody else. So about a week went by, week and a half, like I said with Don and I came out and told him, I said, listen, I said, I've been getting whoops, something pounding on something down in the woods. I said, I don't know what it is, Don. And I said, I just didn't want you to think that I was crazy or nuts. I said, but I have no idea. So he's like, huh. He said, I've heard that kind of stuff up where I live. He lives down in Hopwood, and he lives below one of the biggest caverns in Pennsylvania, which is Laurel Caverns. So he said, I've heard that kind of stuff up by my house. And that's all he said. I said, oh, okay. So months went by. It would be quiet. Then all of a sudden, rocks would be thrown at our vehicles. And Don had a couple rocks thrown at his. That's all they would ever do to him. They wouldn't scream at him or yell or do tree knocks or anything. So months went by. So September 8th, 2011, sitting in my car. I'm about 30 yards away from this telephone pole with the halogen light on it and the piece of plywood that is attached to it. And when you're facing it, the plywood, like I said, is to the left with all the electrical boxes for the office trailers, which are 22, 23 feet away from the pole. So I'm sitting there in my car. Of course, it's 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning. And I'm looking at my phone, and I happen to look up, and I see this black round object at the bottom of this pole. And I look at it for a while, and I'm like, what is that? I'm looking, and then it didn't move. So I'm still looking at it for like a good minute, and it didn't move. So I was like, I just disregarded it as like maybe an animal or something. So I look back down at my phone. When I look back up, probably 10 seconds later, it was gone. I was okay. I look back down at my phone, and I am not lying. I mean, I am not lying. My right hand to God. When I look back up, I saw this big black blob underneath this halogen street light. And I'm looking, and I'm like, what in the heck is that? And I'm looking, and it's about 3 feet away from the pole. Well, I'm looking, and then all of a sudden, it was hunched over, and then it just stood straight up. And I went, what is this I'm looking at? What am I looking at here? And this thing stood up, and when it stood up, let me tell you, it stood up. There's pegs at the side of this pole for like utility workers. I think they're approximately like 8 foot off the ground. So if these guys want to go up in a bucket and then get on, the pegs on the pole and climb up the pole, they can do so if they choose. But, well, this thing was standing right next to the pole, like I said, about 3 feet away. And that peg was sticking out. And I saw the peg, and then I saw its head. And it was probably a good foot, maybe a little bit more above that peg. And it looked at me through my car window, and I looked at it for probably about a good 3 seconds. And then it turned sideways to the left, took a step with its right foot, stopped, and looked right back at me. Turned its head and looked right back at me with its body sideways. And then it took 4 steps and just was behind the very first office trailer. Well, what I saw that night underneath this light, I saw everything. I saw its facial features, the shape of its head, which was a cone-shaped head. So if you picture a gorilla and you look at a gorilla from the side, this Bigfoot is what we call it, amongst other things. Its head was not as prominent of a cone shape as a gorilla. A gorilla's head like slopes backwards. This one sloped backwards, but it wasn't as long. It just was like not on a real pitch like a gorilla. Maybe it was up a little bit higher. Had black, short, shiny hair. I remember its arms and hands. Its hands were down below its knees. And the facial feature was not like a round face, not like a long face, but like a in between. Its nose wasn't as big as a gorilla. Its lips were fairly big, but not real big. And then its eyes. I remember its eyes. They were like sunk back a little bit in the head. And of course, it's night, so I think the eyes just looked black to me. But it just immense. So I'm looking at this thing through my car window. It's looking at me. And if you could picture two linemen, professional NFL linemen, the big guys on the line, you put two of those guys together, and that's how big this thing was. And I'm not joking. That's how wide this thing was. And then when it took the step it turned and took the step to the left and looked back at me, its thighs were just immense. I can't describe how big its thighs were. I mean, just the muscles, from the hip down. I mean, this leg on this animal was just huge. This thing was just huge in stature. I mean, it was just huge. And like I said, it walked away. Well, me being the person that I am, I jump out of my car, and being a constable, I run over there and got my mag light out, and I was shining it right on its back. And I had my weapon out, and I yelled at her, "Hey!" It didn't even miss a beat. It just kept on going, and it walked away. Did not run, nothing. And I was really stupid. I mean, I couldn't have been here today. I couldn't have been alive. If that thing would have turned around, I don't think my gun would have stopped it. But that's just how I am. I really don't back down from too much, but that night I should just stayed in my car. But so anyway, it walked away. I got Don on the two-way. I told him, hurry up and get there. He come flying in there, and I told him what happened. And I said, you'll never guess what I saw. And he's like, what? I said, I just saw a Bigfoot. He didn't say a word. He didn't smirk. He didn't laugh. He just looked at me, and I said, what? And he's like, well, I believe him. I believe in him. He said, I think that's what's up above my house by Laurel Caverns. He said, that's tree knocks. I said, tree knocks? And he's like, yeah. He said, it's how they communicate. And he said, I've heard whoops, screams, and everything. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. He said, I believe in him. So that morning, which would be the 11th, I left the windmill farm at 7 a.m. I got home about 20 after, and immediately I got on the internet and I typed in Bigfoot groups / researchers near me. And the one group that popped up the very first in Google was Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. So I emailed them, and not even 30 seconds went by and my phone rang. And the guy said, "Hey, you have a sighting to report?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he's like, "Well, where'd you see it? Where was it?" I said, "Well, it's at a newly being built windmill farm." I said, "It's in Farmington." I said, "It's off of Skyline Drive." He said, "Off of Mud Pike?" I said, "Yep." He said, "You mind if we come up there this evening?" And I said, "No, not at all." He said, "There's going to probably be about 15 of us." And I said, "That's fine." He said, "What time do you get up there?" I said, "About 7. He said, "We'll be there at 8. I said, "Okay." So he knew where it was. So they came up and they split up into groups of 3, and there was 12 of them. 3 went north, 3 went east, 3 went west, and 3 went south. So they were out there, what they call, doing call blasting, and they're out there for a good 2 to 3 hours. And we're all sitting in the parking lot. There's like 4 or 5 of us there, and they come back and they had audio recordings of what they heard, and they did have them on their website, but I don't think they're there anymore. So they discussed everything that went on, and they said, "Well, we did 1 call blast north, and within 10 seconds we got a response back, like right over the hill from us. And then the people that went east, they did a call blast, and within not even a minute they got a response back. And the people south did the same thing, and they got a response back within, they said, 30 seconds to a minute. But the people that went to the west, they didn't have any luck. So they come to the conclusion that there wasn't 1 Bigfoot there, but there was 3, and it was probably a family. But the guy that I spoke with, he said, "You are not going to have any more problems." He said, "Because that male showed itself to you." He said, "It was definitely the male." He said, "And they did find a print, but it was in sandstone. And I don't think they really could cast it, but I forget how big the print was. They really couldn't tell, but there was a print there." But he said, "Since the male showed itself to you and you didn't leave," he said, "all they want you to do is leave. They want to be left alone." And I said, "Well, I can see why they would be mad or upset or disturbed, because their environment up here has been disrupted." He's like, "Yeah." He said, "But I'm gonna tell you what, right now," he said, they will not bother you." And they came up the second night, and they had no luck whatsoever. But the night that they came up, they had all kind of activity, trees breaking. I mean, just all kind of stuff. But the third night they came up, they had nothing. So anyway, he told me, he said, "You're not going to have any more problems. They're not going to bother you." And I looked at him and I'm like, "Yeah, right." He said, "I'm serious." He said, I've had experiences before." He said, "I've never saw one, but I've had experiences before." He said, "But they've never bothered me." He said, "Because I didn't leave." And he said, "That's the experience I had. I stood my ground and I went back, and they never bothered me." I said, "Oh, okay." So I went back up to work the next evening. I had nothing. You could drop a pin in the parking lot. That's how quiet it was. And it remained that way all the way up until December. And I had nothing, not even a tree knock. So that's my experience. And like I said, it was from 25, 30 yards away. And I can't believe what I saw to this day. And it's an experience I'll never forget as long as I live. I mean, you go out in the woods and You really don't expect to see anything, and then all of a sudden this thing just appears and pops out of nowhere. And it's just I was blessed to have this experience. I mean, that's all I can say about it is I was blessed because not a lot of people experience this, and I did. I mean, I did, and it was something else. And I just want to tell everybody out there, if you think that they're not real, go out in the woods. And I don't know how perceptive you are around the woods or whatever, but look around. If you see like two trees that form an X, walk over and see if there's roots at the bottom of those trees and see if they fell right there. Because I can guarantee you that they didn't fall right there. 90% of the time, they're usually drugged there and they make an X, and everybody says that's for like marking their boundary. So maybe other Bigfoot saying, don't come over this boundary, this is ours. I don't know. That's an assumption. And pertaining to Bigfoot, all types of names for it. But what actually is a Bigfoot? We have no idea. We have no idea what a Bigfoot is. It could be a cross between Gigantopithecus and a gorilla. I mean, it could be a number of things. They do DNA on it. Nothing comes up through the DNA. But as far as experts in the field, if we don't know what we're looking at, then how can you be an expert? I know I don't know what I'm looking at. Primatologists, they have a lot more experience in this and that, but we still don't know what we're looking at. I mean, in general. But like I said, you go out in the woods and just look around you, and if you see an X, or you smell like a foul stench out in the woods, there's one around you, because they do have a very, very, very bad odor. And it's an odor you don't forget. I've smelled that in the woods several times. And I've seen a lot of X's in the woods. And I believe in Bigfoot. And I formed a group on Facebook, SWPA Bigfoot Group. And that's why I formed the group, just to let people know that they are real, living, breathing animals. Because we're considered animals too. We're at the top of the chart. But they are real, living, breathing animals, just like you and I. They are not a myth. They are not folklore. They are real.
My Bigfoot sighting was on January 28th, 2009. My wife and I had been to a birthday party, a little place called Coatesville, which is basically just a name on a map, near Doswell, Virginia. It was about 11:30 at night. It was pretty cold. It was in the 20s, as I recall. And we were riding home, and I've lived in the area all my life, and I've never heard of any bears in the area or any other sightings. So there's a little cattle pond that's beside the road, and when my headlights hit the pond, I saw an animal. I just saw it from the rear, and it looked kind of fuzzy. I said, wow, a bear. I've never seen a bear in this area. I've lived here all my life. But then it stood up and turned and looked at us. And it moved so quickly. That's what kind of caught me off guard. But it stood there and it looked at us, and it had a look of total surprise on its face. It was probably about 25 yards away from us, so it was pretty close. It was directly on our headlights. It was in front of the pond, so there was nowhere for it to run. So it basically just kind of stood there. We went by, and it was extremely muscular. I'm guessing that it was probably a juvenile, in the fact that it did not have any type of bulge around the waist. It was very fit. And I guess maybe 7 feet tall, weight, I don't know. It's, weight's so hard to judge, especially when you don't have any point of reference. But anyway, once we passed, I looked at my wife. I said, "Did you just see something strange?" Because I wanted her to tell me what she saw without saying, "Hey, did you just see that Bigfoot?" And she described the exact same thing that I saw. She didn't pick it up quite as quickly as I did, but she saw it. She saw it stand up and saw its face. So I did contact. Looked online to see if there was anybody in the area that did, Bigfoot reports, and I ran across William Draganis. He came down and we went over to the site where we saw it. And, we walked around and I felt intimidated because it made me realize how big it was when I was standing where I was standing. And also I want to note that William brought out the fact that it's right beside some power transmission lines that come down from Lake Anna, where there's a nuclear power plant there. So that's pretty much our sighting. I don't know of any other sightings in the area, but, that's pretty much it.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.